Hello.
Hi. Just to get started, would you like to present yourself? Just your name, where you are, whatever you'd like to say very briefly.
Yeah, hi. I'm Dan Bloom. I'm a Gestalt therapist from New York City.
Okay.
What else do I have to say? I've been
Well, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's great. We'll just go right into the first question, which is, who are you as a person? What are some of your qualities, your passions, your interests? Who are you?
That is a wonderful question. That is a question that asks the length and breadth of the universe, the personal universe. Who am I? I could leave it at those just simple answers that I said. I can answer it historically. I can answer it presently. I can answer it who I want to be.
Yep.
Who I am has changed so much. You're asking me that question in the middle of the time when time has ended, time when there's no future, and time is lateral, and time is historical. Who I am is in this time of the pandemic is a person whose time is frozen. I don't know who I am right now. Right now, I'm a psychotherapist who's working virtually through internet sessions. I no longer have quite a sense of what's going to be going on in terms of the world, in terms of my place in the world. I had a sense of the trainings and the teaching I was going to be doing the next months and the next years, and I don't know that anymore, so I don't have a sense of a clear projection forward. I know how I've been working. I know how I've been in a trajectory from the very beginning. I know that I've been, as a psychotherapist, more and more interested in the deeper philosophical and general roots of Gestalt therapy. And as I've practiced, I've noticed different kinds of elements of Gestalt therapy growing in my own engagement with it, in my practice, and in my understanding of it. That's been very gratifying. So who I am is constantly changing in terms of myself and in terms of the world, in terms of Gestalt therapy. That sounds grand and it sounds general. I'm looking out right now at the early spring woods. I left New York City yesterday after about 6 weeks of being in New York City in lockdown. New York City was very quiet. It was the quiet of a kind of city that's ground to a close. To come out to my house in the country. So I'm looking at a place where the spring hasn't happened yet, and it was a bright, living spring in New York, and the spring didn't seem right there. It didn't seem right that there were flowers and bright trees. But somehow right now it seems right that there are trees that are still looking like winter. It's funny, if I left spring and I came back to winter, it just struck me right now. So who I am is a guy, I guess, a person who's aware of his surroundings in that way. I came to Gestalt therapy because I was a lawyer. I practiced law for about 7 years. How I became a lawyer was, I guess, a series of personal mistakes or choices based upon interest in language, interest in thinking, and the interest in becoming a professional. But it wasn't who I was, because I'm not interested in business, and I'm not interested in arguments in which you have to win to somebody else. And that was what it was being a lawyer. And I'm also not very good at details, as anybody who's read my writings could tell you. I need I need a lot of copy editing, you know, and it's really terrible. But I need a lot of copy editing, and you can't need a lot of copy editing when you're a lawyer. You cannot send somebody pleadings or a brief when you need a lot of copy editing. Period. And wasn't me. But I came back from a meeting with a client as a lawyer, and I report to one of the partners, and I tell them about the meeting. He said, yes, but I'm glad to hear about those people, but tell me, what did you discuss? I was telling him about the process. So it was clear to me that I was more interested in people than in the details of that meeting. So I was drawn to being a psychotherapist from doing some counseling work. And what drew me to Gestalt therapy was it was an accident because the counseling organization was run by Gestalt therapists who didn't announce themselves as Gestalt therapists, but they were running groups. And it was, well, it was in the late 70s. And Gestalt therapy was kind of hot, and the human potential stuff was kind of hot. And I backed into Gestalt therapy through the side door. And at that time, you didn't need any licensing to be a psychotherapist. So I started to do counseling on the side, and I began to train as a Gestalt therapist. Again, sideways. I could have gone to be a psychoanalyst, but that would require a lot more structured work. It was much easier in a way to be a Gestalt therapist back then. Also, I had done enough of that study. It was easier for me to go into the Gestalt therapy world. I'm compressing a lot of personal detail there.
Yeah, no, there's a few more questions coming up to tease some of that stuff out.
Yeah, we can get to that.
So who are you? So who are you? That was the question. Who are you?
Yeah. Can you figure that out from what I said?
Yeah.
Did I slide off of that?
Yep. Unless there's anything you want to add to the who you are as a person, or if you want to come back to that.
As a person? You mean as a person?
As a person, yeah. Not the narrative, not the chronological, structural.
Who are you as a person?
Oh no, that's another interview.
Give me a hint. How does a person answer that question?
Well, I can tell you other people have answered that. I've gotten I've gotten verbs. I've had a string of adjectives. I've had chronologies and curriculums and a few I don't honestly knows.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't honestly know.
But it's kind of like maybe in a right now, sort of not a what you do, not a what you have, not where you were.
Yeah, but that's good. You see, I'm an historical person. I believe in lived history. You know, right. I believe. Yeah. So to some extent, in telling you that, I'm giving you a sense of the momentum of the ball that's still in motion, the pitch. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's part of my lived history. If I were to tell you that the street address that I lived in each of my addresses, that would be something else. But the choice of the pieces of the history that I've told you are the lived history that I'm telling you. So as much as I would be announcing the various organs that I put it, the vital parts of my present, as much as the vital parts of my past. So who am I as a person? Right now, part of my present interest, direct in your face interest is how interesting it is to me to be in front of the screen with you occupying so much of my monitor.
You can make me smaller. You can look at yourself too.
I'm not going to look at myself because I've learned that is extremely distracting.
Okay.
And that it's an interesting experience for me. It's a fascinating experience to be this close to you with your lively face. Now I've come to appreciate the virtual engagement, the lively virtual engagement with a person to a monitor. To take the step further from the flat planar engagement to the new three-dimensional that we create together in the interaction. So this is absolutely a person. I could, as if, reach through the screen and grab you this way, because I know what's behind you. You are three-dimensional. I know that you have a shape, and this is the thing that I'm exploring. So who am I as a person now? I'm a person who's interested in you. I'm not just a person who's speaking. I'm a person who's speaking and engaging with your face. I'm very much engaged with your back and forth. This is who I am. I'm a person with you right now. This is very much of who I am.
That's a really fun answer. It's a really fun answer, and it's a it's the experience of you, because now I don't have to ask you. You don't need the words.
Yeah, yeah,
There's a
yeah.
between us.
And I just felt my hand moves. You do that. And this is when people say you can't do this online. I say this is nonsense. I can tell you all the things I can't do. I want to have a list of things I can't do. Let's sit down and talk about what we can't do. Well, that's boring. That is absolutely boring.
And this is not on the list of things that can't happen online.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm excited by the expressions on your face.
Yeah. This is very interesting. I enjoy you very much. We've had very little time together, very little interaction. But yeah, I have a lot of curiosity. So, do you want another question?
Oh, come on, yes.
Sure.
I love this. I once answered it. Somebody once called and I picked up the phone, which I almost never do, and it was one of these poll, actually a political poll. I was so excited. I said, finally you're asking me.
Someone's finally asking you the question.
Finally, then I lost the call.
Oh, that's so unfortunate. Maybe they'll tune into the interview. So one of the other questions that we have is, what event or circumstance would you say has really shaped who you are, and how?
Oh God. You heard me say, "Oh God." That was not a statement of a relationship. That was not the answer. I hope it wasn't the answer. That would unravel a lot of fabric. That's impossible. The catalog, the cascade of possibilities, just I go back. There are catastrophe after catastrophe. The births and deaths, the historical events. I can't even say them. And it's arrogant to know. How could I know? I met with a friend, a colleague, who asked me, "What is your primal wounding?" I said, "What?"
Yeah, that's a much more sophisticated way of asking the question.
What's my primal wounding? I said, I sat down. I said, "So you've been in therapy?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "So what's your primal wounding?" And we didn't call it that, and I never thought of it as a primal wounding. I got curious.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily aiming, at wounds and scars and
I know you
horror
were.
stories.
That's where I went. That's where I went. Dental surgery I had when I was 10. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. But there are a lot of events. My first thought was I went to the tragedy of AIDS in the 80s and 90s. That I don't think I'll ever take the measure of that completely. I can never take the measure of that completely. When I was practicing as a psychotherapist, I never guessed that I'd be practicing through so much misery, so much death. I became a psychotherapist trying to figure out that when I did 78, give or take. But and I went to I stopped practicing law, and I overlapped, and then I went to social work school, and then almost immediately in the early 80s, graduated social school in 81, but almost immediately people started dying, and I didn't, and then my practice was caught up in that, and I never would have guessed that would be the dominant theme of my practice in New York for almost 15 or more years. And that was no. So that was, but that can I say that was? I don't know. But that's where my first thought. That was my first thought. Does it affect me now? I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. Another one of our questions, which may be just as unanswerable, but I mean, it's sort of in the playful spirit of conversation as well, is in terms of other human beings, who would you say has had the most impact on who you are as a human being?
Yeah, I can answer that one. Um, I heard, when I said that, my voice echoed. My voice. um,
Okay.
Let me think to be accurate about it. Richard Kitzler was
Okay.
my mentor as a psychotherapist. He's the reason I stayed as a Gestalt therapist. Um, no surprise that a lot of Gestalt therapists didn't lead with their intellect back in the 70s. And I was mistrusted a lot because I came as a lawyer, and people thought that I didn't have any feelings. All I did was think. Richard was very thoughtful, very smart, very intellectual, and he had knowledge in philosophy, knowledge in literature, and immediately appealed to me. And he taught me Gestalt therapy, and he taught it in a very high level intellectual way. Also Isidor Fromm, but I studied more with Richard than with Isidor. And I respected his thinking. He was very brilliant. And if he weren't there, his style of thinking, I wouldn't have been interested enough in Gestalt therapy to stay, because he satisfied that part of my thinking, that part of my personality that needs that kind of precision, that kind of analytical skill. It was a royal pain in the ass. We had a rocky relationship sometimes, and but still he had grounded in literature and philosophy and in poetry and somewhat in music, but he still had that enough of that and respect for me, and he taught me, and for a long time, as my relationship with him matured and we became friends, he was my mentor, and he helped shape the kind of Gestalt therapist I wound up being, and yeah, and gave me the courage to maintain that, and it was okay for me to be as thoughtful a Gestalt therapist. Isidore would have done the same thing. A lot of the Isidorians I get along too. I mean, Richard was my primary teacher, Richard, Isidore, and Laura. Anyway.
Okay. And I mean, those are three professionals, but are those the people who have shaped you in your life as a person as well?
Yeah, well, Richard more personal, much more personal. But other than that, no, those were pretty. Richard was pretty. He cut across personal. We were personal friends, and that was a period of time from the 1970s on. When I was, so that was pretty much when I was much younger. Nobody quite as important as Richard. Yeah. I guess he would take the place of an uncle, father, a pain in the ass. I know there's a bunch of us get together and we talk about how we fucked ourselves. We were all in therapy with him, so it was really like, my God, we never finished our transference. What a really, it's really terrible. He just ruined all of us. Yeah.
And you say that with such a smile.
Yeah. Well, that's the nature of the transfer. Yes.
Okay. Interesting. So you've said a little bit about how you came to Gestalt or where you came from. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I'm interested in what you were most attracted to in Gestalt.
Yeah.
Or what you are most attracted to, or what has changed over the years in that.
A lot changed. A lot's changed. What I was attracted to was this welcoming, was this combination of freedom, art, thought. I love it when it says the internet connection is unstable. I always take it personally, but you're unstable.
I know, I feel so offended by that.
Yeah, I said, and how could it dare be unstable? It's one more thing wrong with computers today, my computer today. It's a combination of all of those things. It's freedom at a time. In the early days, it represented, it was the very therapy of freedom, of personal freedom, of art, of personal freedom. It gathered together all of the various various liberation movements, and it became that, and it was very attractive. Over time, what how did my relationship to Gestalt therapy has changed in my involvement with it? How do I put this? I was very active in different areas in Gestalt therapy. For a while, I was very organizationally active. I was very loyal to New York. I am very loyal to the New York Institute of Gestalt Therapy. That's my primary identification. And by being primarily identified there, I'm identifying myself with the history of the New York of Gestalt therapy. That's important to me, Gestalt therapist, and I see a through line there. I don't know how to quite answer how I know where I am now in Gestalt therapy. I can answer it that way. I can't answer. Right now, I can't get a handle on how I got here. But I know where I am. Where I am now in Gestalt therapy is a great deal of respect for Gestalt therapy as its place in the world of contemporary Gestalt therapies. I see Gestalt therapy as fundamentally and importantly the most aggressively phenomenological of all psychotherapies. So we have a tremendous skill and gift to be a clinical phenomenology because we've been studying human experience from day one. And we're at the heart of Gestalt therapy is attention to human experiencing and the structure of human experiencing. And we are able to attend to it, articulate it, and to have the courage to ride it to its ultimate place. We don't flinch. We stay with experience wherever it takes us. That's what it is to be a Gestalt therapist. We, in various different ways, we ride it in our work, and we trust that that is what the clinical work is. That's the basis of clinical phenomenology. And we could do this along with relational psychotherapies of various different means. We have a lot in common with others, and we can teach them and show them how to do it because we have been doing it. We can open up conversations with them because we know how to do that. And that's where I am now, Gestalt therapy. So the things I write now are drawing from the foundational material in Gestalt therapy, bringing it forward and as an offering to contemporary Gestalt therapists to show this is where we have been. This is what we can use now because this is where we have been. And this is what we can show the whole world based upon what we have in common with all phenomenologies. And this is where I am now, based upon all that I've studied, all that I've practiced. This is what I want to teach. I want to open up Gestalt therapy to the broadest world, which is social, which is political, which is cultural, which is historical, which is ethical. And this is where I'm landing now in Gestalt therapy. And this is where this is where I am.
Right, and this where you are, you alluded to it a little bit, but where do you see it going, or where do you want to take it?
Yeah, this is where I want to take it. I want to take Gestalt therapy away. I want to take it and open it to where we've always been, to situate Gestalt therapy in the world, because we've always been in the world. I mean, being by world is, instead of taking a narrow view of the here and now, a broader view of the here and now that can account for the social, can account for the political, can account for the ecological as being part of the phenomenological.
And does that mean for you taking it to different clinical fields? Does it mean taking it to different client bases, to different populations, training therapists in a different way? How do you take it there?
I offering that the conceptual tool, and others can take it there based upon their own interests. I will offer the conceptual tool. Now, other people have more experience in those other areas, but like in politics, in education, and things like that. But one of the axes I drive is that I don't see a limitation in Gestalt therapy. One of my colleagues said, I was doing Gestalt therapy for years, and then I saw the limitations in it, and I started to add in such and such. Well, I said to this person, well, maybe you didn't see that you didn't go there in Gestalt therapy, which would have been the same thing you got from the other places. That it's not so much the limitation, but you just didn't take it there.
Right.
and I can show how you can take it there. You know, Gestalt therapy isn't like the, you know, like the catechism of a particularly narrow church. There's a lot of fluidity there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm curious, just trying to put these in some order. We do try and keep some kind of consistency, even though the conversations could go in so many different ways. Because I'm like, there's a question there that goes with this. Hold on. I'm curious, what have been the challenges for you in doing what you do, being who you are, how you are? What have been your challenges in Gestalt? Because I mean, if you're fighting against some people's ignorance of the capacity or the capability and their own ignorance of themselves, what have been some of your challenges?
Trusting that people are more understanding of me than I think. That well, how do I put this? Put it another way. Sometimes that look, in editing you cut that part out.
Right. We would, but sorry. Donations are welcome. Maybe we can pay an editor if we get donations.
It's even better. In a truly experimental film, you'd include this as part of the wonderful parts of it.
It's part of the process.
Part of the process. It's better much better this way. Much better this way. Because you can tell that this person is, you can just imagine what's going on that's not being said, which is probably the better part of this. In the pauses, then in the pauses is all of the wealth, all of the richness, and you're just going to leave it to the person. If anybody's going to see this, this is what if you want to know what the pauses are.
We'll come back and we'll ask, what didn't you say in that interview?
Right. What didn't you say? And it'll be the
that'll be the good stuff.
Written about it. I've had conflicts with people who misunderstood me. I think that I've been thought to be a little bit more disembodied than I am. I think that I might have been. I've gone through periods of my life where I was a little more, how do I put it, aggressive than I experienced myself to be. People would be put off by my inclination to speak in declarative sentences, and that people would be pushed away. And I would push people away a lot, and people would feel that they couldn't speak to me. And rather than enter into what is sometimes referred to as a dialogue, they'd feel that I wasn't interested in talking to them, and I'd be accused of shutting off contact. And it would be very hurtful to me because it was not my intent at all. My intent was to continue a conversation, but because I would be speaking in a certain way, either because I was speaking loudly or quickly, or I was lost in the thought, I would be told, but you're not interested in me. And I'd say something like, but I am interested in you. But in that moment, I was caught up here, but I'm really interested in you and I'd like to hear from you. And but before that happened, I would get into people would cut me off and shut me out. And this was over a period of time, we're getting there. But the initial time, people would dismiss me because of that. And they wouldn't put me over here. And they would say, he's just not connected to other people. And not get that I was really hurt by this. And that, really, really hurt and confused. I didn't get this at all while this was happening. And that people really were not connecting with me. So the result was I felt, kind of, not understood, pushed away. It took a while for me to go, to understand my part in it, and to soften a bit, and to be more engaged and engaging. I take responsibility for some of it, and I also think other people ought to too. And other people have. There've also been fundamental. I was also, because over time I've inherited some of the family traits of the New York Institute, of feeling that we had an axe to grind, and we did have an axe to grind, and those days were over. But over the decades, there was a sense that Gestalt therapy had lost its way, and we had a particular point of view. But that faded, and long after that faded, people still held us responsible for being for being crusaders when we let that go for a long time. But I say, and I've had, and I've also softened a great deal on that. Softened a great deal on that, and so there are those things.
Yeah, it's always difficult to sort of carry a family name, right? Like
yeah. Even though I remain substantially and fundamentally flag waving, and completely loyal to the history of Gestalt therapy, living history of Gestalt therapy. As people get that, the living history of the New York Institute, which means changing history.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so those are challenges, definitely.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about how to frame this, and I'm trying to do it appropriately, because it's a question that I initially started asking. It wasn't on our list, but I started asking it with women. So now I've learned to ask more inclusively how you have experienced your gender and your identity in the field of Gestalt, if you want to speak to that.
Being gay or being a man?
Being gay or being a man or being a gay man or any combination of.
Well, being a man is usually being invisible. I don't. I've only noticed myself as a man as against a woman noticing me being a man.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I remember once at a meeting. There was this. I think it was a Manchester conference. And it was a wonderful experience. And I was speaking to a British colleague, and I was standing. She was sitting seated, and I was standing talking to her, and she said something like, "You're intimidating me, physically." And I said to her, "Wait a minute. Do you realize you're sitting and I'm standing, and we're making direct eye contact? I'm intimidating you." I realized that it's my physical presence as a man, no matter what my height is and her height is, still was intimidating. And I realized that this is a physical intimidation of being a man. I'm making a joke of it, but there's something about that. Yeah. And back to what I said before about my declarative sentences, I got this. There's something about male energy involved in that too, and I got a sense that there's something about a push in a male's energy that women also feel pulled back from. So I experienced that only in that context, and the gay issue I have also felt an invisibility about, is that there's, and I've been sometimes wondered about that, whether it could possibly be as good as that. But in the earliest days, most of the Gestalt therapists were gay back in the 70s. They were all, and it was most of, yeah, sure, the New York Institute, for sure. And it was those who didn't fit in were attracted to Gestalt therapy back in the 50s and the 60s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try not to, push or dig into any of the questions anymore. Just as far as you want to take the answer, and that's fine.
I'm glad to, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So one of the other questions that we do have is, some people have stories, anecdotes, whatever. Some have very memorable sessions as a therapist or as a client. But what would you say are some of or one of your greatest memories involving Gestalt in some way?
I have no idea. I don't know. I'd have to really, if nothing comes immediately to mind. What are some people's memories?
Well, like I said, sometimes you have the life-changing epiphany, someone meets you, or you watch a client break True.
Yeah, Doma and I carrying Sylvia Crocker home to her hotel in Puebla. She was drunk as drunk as could be.
And what is it about that that makes it a great memory?
So much fun. we
Okay.
were downing tequila. That's when I learned to drink tequila with the salsa with the different things. The camaraderie, the love of the
Okay.
three of us, and watching it and having such a good time, and kidding it with her about it. Three of us joking about it ever since, and reminding Sylvia about how we had to watch her going up the elevator, make sure she's in her room. And this reminds me of the kind of on again, off again loving relationship I had with Sylvia. We would tear at each other and have fights, and I would never speak to you again. And then after a few months, I said, okay, Sylvia, I love you.
Right.
So
That's
again,
kind of the camaraderie, right?
yeah. Maybe
Well, another
the
question.
Mexican memory was because of talking to you too.
Okay. The Puebla connection there.
Yeah.
So how would you say that Gestalt over the years or right now or whatever has affected you as a person? I mean, you've said softened, you've said a lot of different things, but how
has it affected
you?
me? It's hard to know because so much has affected me. So much has affected me. There's a spaciousness of thinking and of experiencing that comes from a kind of openness. You know, I only think about the Heideggerian way of saying of letting things be, the Gelassenheit, a kind of openness to what it is. And I noticed that when I read in a study group with other psychotherapists, immediately take to certain concepts, and it seems just what happens in a therapy session naturally. And that's, I'm not saying this is uniquely Gestalt therapy, but it comes from my part of my attunement as a Gestalt therapist. Now, without how do I put this? I think that's something from Gestalt therapists have as a consequence of Gestalt therapy, good Gestalt therapy training, good Gestalt therapy practicing as a consequence of it, that other therapists may not have. I have to.
Okay.
That
makes, like when you say like an openness of thinking, I get the impression of sort of a not knowing and being willing to not know.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a very simple level.
It's very simple, but it's not. It's kind of a basic. A lot of
therapists. I know you are much more subtle and much more nuanced than I am. I do know that.
Yeah, but it's like that. But to gesture it, it's sort of the basic. Other therapies, yes, do that and not knowing, and certainly, but there's something very that. And when you see somebody do a demonstration, and the good demonstrations are those moments get achieved when those kinds of the clearing happens, a real clearing, and that's when you do that enough. You can be in the world that way. It's a kind of a default place. I'm making that up. I don't know if that's true, but that's what's coming.
Well, I mean, I asked how it's affected you, and you said that it's made you this way.
I don't know if it has, but I don't know if that has, but that's where I can do that. Like a Buddhist can say the Buddhist. But I haven't.
Right. Okay. I'm also curious about where either you or Gestalt might be going in the future. Um, what do you see happening?
Yeah.
And I know it's
Yeah.
a really weird time in the world to ask that.
No, it is a weird time. Who knows? Uh, yeah. Well, on the one hand, I'm worried because when I see, on the other hand, I'm not. What I'm worried about is when I see things like um, a retreat for things like neuroscience and things like that, where it's a movement away from a phenomenological and it sort of look to a more scientific explanation, and leaving the very basis that makes Gestalt therapy what it is. Not that it's anything a mistake in terms of understanding human beings, but it's not the heart. Then I see that's not the whole ball game. Um, I'm thinking when I'm doing it, I'm thinking about what programs and conferences are. I mean, some things are wonderful I see going on in conferences. You know, I was very, I like to see a lot of the things that were presented at conferences were really quite wonderful. The Toronto conference had a wonderful theme. You know, I don't remember what it was. I remember thinking how wonderful it was. The AGC conference had a wonderful sensitivity, wonderful thematic direction. If those things are representative of where Gestalt therapy is going or intends to go, that's not a bad thing. If that's what people, if they're living, if that's the intention.
Okay.
Question is what's happening in various countries. In the United States, Gestalt therapy is disappearing. There's a lot more interest in other countries. A lot more interest in other countries. And a lot more interest in serious Gestalt therapy. I'm using Isidore's word at this thing. Malware is just showing up in front of your face. We'll get rid of it. We don't want to have that.
No, I swear, there's no malware coming out of my face. I'm safe.
Yeah.
Okay. So about, you talk about intentionality and things. Where would you like to take, what would you concretely, particularly like to do?
Well, not more what I'm doing. You know,
Okay.
I'm giving some lectures in the next month, online lectures to Italy and Ukraine on particular themes and opening up pushing some ideas into Gestalt therapy. I could do more of that. Things like that. If that's what you mean. Still push some of those notions of Gestalt therapy, particularly I'm really focusing now on the relational, on responsivity, on the notions of how we can push the relational notions and explore and expand dialogue in a way that has a meaningfully ethical position. Things like that. Go on and on.
And what is that for you? A meaningfully ethical position?
Well, to take seriously our responsibility for one another, inherent in dialogue. Because I think that one of the themes in almost everything I think and write is to get rid of the cliches. And I think that some of a Gestalt cliche is dialogue. But I have a paper coming out in the Gestalt review towards the end of the year. It was one of the things I do is challenge the idea of inclusion, and see whether or not we can go beyond inclusion, because inclusion has an assumption that I can understand your experience. But what if we say I cannot understand your experience? What I can do is be responsive to your experience, and that creates a different kind of, instead of a kind of a parallel mutuality, but a sense of this where we respond to one another, and that creates an ethical responsibility. And that happens instead of a kind of a parallel response, and we're changing the whole structure of relationality. And that can happen in a therapy session, because it does happen in a therapy session. We say that it happens because obviously, it's not, we're there for the person, so it's not parallel. But it goes beyond that because it happens in therapeutic contacting. That's what we have to offer. I should explain that in more detail. But things like that, to go beyond our assumptions about what things are, to tickle out some of that. And that has an ethical dimension. It has some of what's called pathic. So we take on the other person. So move away from a notion in contacting, which is all directional that way, to understand contacting is coming at us this way. To move away from a kind of a phallocentric idea. I think we had an exchange on that one, which I think, and you pointed out how that's also happening in your world. I think this is where I think Gestalt therapy needs to take a breath in a more broad way and see that this is really what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, what you just described to me sounds like a much less omnipotent kind of therapist, and
Oh, yeah.
it sounds like it recognizes a lot more difference and a lot more dynamic.
Yeah, and a welcoming, not just forgiving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's a kind of a little adjustment of the basic theory, because the basic theory is a post-war theory. It contains some of the relics, I think, of the mid 20th century. Mm-hmm. How could it not? So we destructure it. We look at things backwards hermeneutically. We have to look at who we are hermeneutically. We constantly unfold. Turn the next page, and feel the page in our hands. And what does that mean? Who if my patient comes in the door, right, is going to be the different patient who came in last year. And the therapist I am today is a different therapist who welcomed somebody last year. Can't change that.
No, you can't.
So that's where I'm going. That's the stuff that's cooking now.
I will definitely be on the lookout for that. So I'm wondering if there's anything in particular that you would like to add, or if there's anything you think we should be asking. No?
No. Okay.
All right. Well, I would like to say thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. And
Oh, it's my pleasure. My pleasure.
So
I hope I satisfied your needs.
I'm pretty difficult to satisfy. I'll be back. We'll continue talking more. I'm sure at some point.
Oh, thank you.
But that's what it is. This has been lovely. So thank you.
Well, my pleasure. Anytime.